Good morning.
Greetings, greetings. How y'all doing?
Doing fantastic. How are you doing?
Tell me why. There's some enthusiasm behind that, and I want more information.
Okay, you sort of turned into a robot there for me for a second, Dave. I don't know about for other people.
I, I said
It's
your enthusiasm on that response was high, and I want more information on why you're feeling so good.
okay. Reason number one, it is a beautiful, perfect day in Western Massachusetts. Um, it's sunny and breezy and cool. It's like 68, 70 degrees here. So it's just really lovely. That's reason number one, that it's wonderful. Reason number two is because we get to talk about upgrading Regen Token Economics, which I'm so excited about. I see Max just hopped in. Welcome, Max. And yeah, I just spent my morning working on kind of this geeky intersection of taxonomies and schemas and definitions and functions and the weird cybernetic network of protocols and processes that we call Regen Network, and just trying to think about how to, I don't know, I was sort of thinking about, Dave, I've been thinking along the lines of writing a blog, kind of outlining where
Mm-hmm.
we're at and where we're going. And I was working on that and some of the more, like some of the less public articulation, but just some of the own internal technical clarification. So I'm in a good mood, feeling good.
Good. That's fantastic. Well, similarly, I'm feeling pretty good too. It's Santa Barbara, West Coast summer. The ocean water is quite warm, and it's one of the big celebrations in our town this week called Fiesta, which is fun. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty bullish. Regen's got really exciting stuff moving right now, and it's going to be a really big fall. So I'm pretty pumped up for the energetic field around the network right now. I think it's an exciting space. Hey, Max, if you're out there, make sure you are using your phone for Twitter or X or whatever we're doing here. And then I can bring you up to come speak. You can request to speak, or I'll extend an invite, which I have already, but I'm guessing you haven't seen it yet, but would love to have you up here. And also, want to say hello to our other co-host, Sarah Baxendale. Bax, gallivanting around Paris and other places. Maybe we can just drop in with you to start this morning. You've been speaking and demoing and meeting our friends across Web3. Give us a temp check. Like where are you at? Where's Regen at? What's moving in the space?
Yeah, so good evening. I am currently in Berlin, which for anyone who knows me makes me really happy because I grew up in Germany. So I'm eating cheese and schnitzel and all the delicious German things. Yeah, I've been taking Regen on a European road tour. So it's been a couple of weeks of Bax takes Regen to Europe. The journey started out in Lisbon, in Portugal, where I met with folks from ReFi DAO and Closer DAO, Near, HBAR Foundation, a bunch of our collaborators and partners in the Lisbon area, and had the opportunity to have lunch with a ton of people in our ecosystem, Quicksilver, lots of really deep connections and just really authentic conversations about where the industry's at, where climate's at, where blockchain is at, really emerged under all of the beautiful Portuguese sunlight, because it's very, very bright in Lisbon for anyone who's been there before. And then I went to Paris for a whirlwind of events, all related to, everything from Ethereum to Cosmos to climate impact, and really got to spend an enormous amount of time with partners that we have across every ecosystem, which was super enlivening and super creative and super interesting. So to give some folks like a couple of cool highlights from the journey, I spent a lot of time at Funding the Commons, which is really cool. It's sort of like a more Ethereum vibe, more DAO, public goods, the commons, ReFi kind of a vibe, and really just found amazing, creative, kindred spirits all across that particular event who were talking about participatory governance models and how do we actually make climate impact happen on chain and what do we do about data standards, like very, very much the conversations that we have, in Regen Network every single day. I also had the privilege of going to a lot of the Cello ReFi events. I finally got to meet our dear friends at Toucan Protocol in person, saw our old friends from KlimaDAO in person, and Filecoin Green, and lots of other folks, and was able to spend a ton of time really just like sitting down with people and talking about how we all work together, how we get carbon across all the chains, what does interchain carbon ultimately look like. And then I was able to take a wonderful trip to OsmoCon. Our community manager, Sari, was sweet enough, also popped up in Paris. She and I did some marketplace demos, showed off our technology live. And Giancarlo, who is one of our Cosmos SDK engineers, I found by accident in Lisbon, Portugal, and then inspired him to come to Paris, where he at OsmoCon did a Cosmos SDK groups module demo. And then closed out a lot of the excitement at Nebular Summit, which is the Interchain Builders Conference, presenting both demos of Regen Marketplace to help folks understand how you functionally use the systems to offset for Cosmos Zero and the Cosmos ecosystem, as well as I had the privilege of showing an example of the use of permissionless credit class live on testnet, where I was able to issue credits on the testnet for a project that I built in Pittsburgh about a decade ago. So maybe I'll pause there and see if you guys have any cool questions. I have lots of like fun trends I could talk about. All kinds of cool stuff I definitely learned on the road.
Well, and maybe Sarah, just a follow-up. I mean, how, again, we've been in the Cosmos ecosystem for quite some time, and you ran into a lot of cosmonauts. One, what is your sense of the health of the Cosmos ecosystem right now and the excitement level? And also, like, where do people see Regen? I mean, again, I'm not looking for rose-colored glasses here, but like, how do they view Regen Network right now? And what do you see as opportunities for us to, with our Web3 friends, to engage moving forward?
Yeah, so I think there's an incredible amount of love for Regen in the Cosmos ecosystem. I mean, we're like very much seen as sort of like the heart of the Cosmos because the work we do goes beyond technology into the human sphere. We're one of the only groups with really authentic real world use cases. So it's definitely open arms for Team Regen and Cosmos. And there's also this incredible respect for our team having been the lead maintainers and the original architects of the Cosmos SDK. Every time I brought our CTO's name, Aaron Cralius, up, the legend of Aaron, everyone immediately looked around with extraordinary excitement thinking he was there, which unfortunately he was not there. But there is definitely a really deep appreciation for the infrastructure development work that we did as a public good for the entire Cosmos ecosystem, and a lot of excitement about what it could look like for us to have, really be leading real world use cases in the Cosmos. And then, I think at an opportunity level, there's a big trend across the entire Cosmos ecosystem. It's really this conversation around what does the interchain really mean? And ultimately, the interchain is a technical concept that means all the chains can connect, that it's been a concept really isolated inside of Cosmos itself, and the 200 and some app chains, that are interoperable within what we call the Cosmos, but is more intelligently branded as the interchain. And you're seeing more and more and more this awareness that there needs to be access to liquidity over on Ethereum, L1 and L2s, that EigenLayer is coming, that Evmos is deploying, interchain interoperability, Polkadot's deploying with Juno. There's a lot of people asking the questions of how do we break out of the boundaries of the cosmos and really get into the much bigger market and user basis that is with Ethereum L1 and L2s and Solanas and Ripples and all these other places. And it patterns very intelligently with what I was experiencing in person, which is that, culturally, Regen Network is most culturally aligned with all the climate impact applications that have been built on blockchains. At the end of the day, there are no bounds in ecology other than the change of an ecosystem from one ecosystem to another ecosystem environment. We have this opportunity when we really look at what does it mean to make climate impact using blockchain. There's so many different versions of that happening in so many different technical ecosystems. And what we really need is to be able to interact with those ecosystems, coordinate with those application partners, really expand the impact and reach of restoring ecology using blockchain as our database. And so there's this really big trend of how do we think of interchain as a concept where all chains, no matter where they start or end, can connect. And I do think that Regen is one of the best use cases because I'm having seen every carbon presentation in the entire industry now. I do still think we have the best climate impact platform. Very biased, obviously, but I do really still feel that way. And I do think our ability to connect to all of our partners, no matter where they are technically, and really overcoming those technical boundaries and becoming everything on blockchain, becoming the interchain, is really the paradigm shift that I think the Cosmos ecosystem is waking up to, the need to be far more expansive with the concept of interoperability. So I'll pause there.
Well, thanks for the share, and thanks for repping Regen. I mean, that's I know you've been on quite a big trip, and you've got some plenty of events ahead. So thanks for repping. Gregor, anything you want to pick up there, or shall we pivot into the tokenomics discussion?
I think we should dive into the token economics discussion. I think we should probably have Will up here as well, just to introduce Max. Hey, Max. Good morning, good afternoon. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Pleasure to be with you here.
Awesome. So
currently it's 9 p.m. in Kazakhstan, where I'm currently.
Amazing. I've always wanted to visit Kazakhstan. Are you in Almaty, or where are you in Kazakhstan?
Yeah, in Almaty, looking at beautiful mountains from my window.
Amazing.
My wife is Kazakh, so we stick here for some time.
Awesome. Yeah, beautiful. Well, Will, thanks for hopping up. I thought it might be nice, Will, before we dive in with Max, for you to just give a little bit of a context and reminder of the process, sort of the community side of the process that's culminating in Max stepping in and kind of introducing himself now and leading a process. So do you mind just kind of doing a quick summary of the process side of what's been taking place as we as a community start to think about how we upgrade our token economics at a protocol level?
Sure, yeah. So I guess my mind is going back to our gathering in person in Great Barrington last September, or slightly south of Great Barrington, and we had someone from the block science team there, and I guess I'd say tokenomics is like a mode of it's a lifestyle rather than a goal. You don't have like a final tokenomics. It's an ongoing process of evolution. And so we had a conversation that opened up last fall with block science, and that specific project didn't end up coming to fruition. Our lead contact there took a CTO job elsewhere, but that led to a request for proposals that went up. And then when I was in Austria for the Ko-Fi gathering this spring at the Crypto Commons associate with the Crypto Commons Association, I got to spend some time with some other block science team members, Jeff Emmett and Jessica Zartler, and they said, "Hey, we have somebody in our network, this guy Max, who's come from the Token Engineering Commons, who would be a great person to steward a tokenomics DAO for Regen." So the kind of current place we are in the process right now is in this progressive decentralization process that we mapped out in the white paper of going from one or two entities at the core of the Regen Network ecosystem to a proliferation of many different groups, each stewarding a different aspect of the ecosystem. So Max is coming in to head up this tokenomics DAO. So that's the basics.
Awesome. Thanks for the overview there, Will. And yeah, Max comes to us through a bit of a process with, engaging with different people and recommended highly by our friends Jeff and Jessica, who were part of the genesis of Common Stack and the Trusted Seed and work at Block Science now. And Max is part of the Trusted Seed and has been working on token engineering and community processes and is a product manager. So we're really excited that Max is leaning in and taking the lead to run this process from here on out. And so with that, Max, do you want to just give an introduction to yourself and just start there, and then we can get in a little bit to how you're envisioning the process moving forward, and we can kind of dialogue a little bit about that, and maybe folks who are interested can also hop in and ask questions.
Sure. Can you hear me well now?
Yeah, perfectly.
Cool. So I had my education in economics, though most of my life I worked in IT, now maybe 16 to 17 years. I managed my IT development company for more than 10 years, and I fall in love with the whole DAO space when it emerged around 16, 17. I started to, pick brains of great people at that time with conference, community building, and trying to, in the same time, build something working in this space. Practiced it in different activism communities, participated in the government policy. So yeah, I'm trying to bring all the experience and also passion about the ecology I started to develop in the last years. So it comes all nicely together. As to the process, so far we are setting up administrative questions about the funding of this working group, which is planned for 3 to 12 months, and the processes, how we will onboard people. I will come up this week with some posts on the Commonwealth about the state of things and share the current documentation we have. We had a discussion about having some meaningful result in terms of a tokenomics model in the next 3 months, and in terms of the nearest deliverables is some form of executive summary outlining the logics of this group, especially for founders. But with that, we also are looking into different proposals we got and businesses and asset managers and in general foresighting the trends on the market for that tokenomics model. That's a brief state of things. If you have any questions or want to discuss any particular aspect, would love to.
Awesome. Cool. So I think it's probably useful. I kind of want to separate the conversation into two pieces of things, to sort of two levels. The first level, I do think it's really interesting to talk about kind of the content. What are our options for upgrading the token economics to make a tighter link between regenerative outcomes and sort of value exchange, accrual, and incentives in the network, and just making that clear and like where we're going towards. So that's the content level, and also the process level, getting to dive deeper into what's the process we're going to be going through right now in order to upgrade the token economics, and what is the process we're hoping to evolve as a community to, in an ongoing way, continue to have the ability to dynamically evolve the token utility, functionality, and kind of set of incentives. So the sort of content and process are the two levels of conversation that I'm excited to dig into. And again, definitely invite folks who are listening to hop on and engage if you have opinions or ideas, and also remind everybody that there's conversations in Commonwealth about this. And obviously this is going to pick up as we get going. This is kind of, consider this introduction to Max and this process. Kind of, I think we're also going to be digging into this on next week's community call in a little bit more detail. So we can kind of think of this as an informal conversational approach, and the call on Zoom that's in the Regen community calendar to be slightly more, a little bit more formal, meaning there'll be links in a slideshow that you can click through, and sort of conversational engagement in that way. And then of course the Commonwealth Forum and engagement there in a little bit more formal way. So I just kind of did an overview, reiterating a little bit around orienting, I guess, around where different parts of the conversation are going, and trying to frame out the conversation related to, the content. And I think we'll have like debates and processes about the content, but then the deeper, this is how we're going to approach things. I wonder, Max, if I can kind of ask you, in your mind, and through your experience with Trusted Seed and just your vantage point, looking at this from a product perspective, what are the ideal processes that we should be thinking of in order to sort of generate a token economics upgrade? And so let's start there, and then I'll dig in, and I've got a bunch of other questions just to dialogue with you. So what are your thoughts about that? What are ideal processes, and what does that process look like? What are we learning from in order to inform that as well?
Well, as a starting point, of course, it's like a systemic issue. So we should use systemic instruments like basic plan, do, act, reflect cycle, and thus some kind of general cycles of the economy we should take in mind. Because currently, of course, like this year and last year, I was like downside trend, and thus whatever we test, we should be, I think, clear about which kind of metrics we're trying to affect. So of course, everybody thinks about the token price, but as I mentioned, like maybe liquidity, token value locked, or monthly active users or something. Like we will probably go about with building some hypothesis about what is the current state and the trends on the market, what is the desired state, what is the mechanism of going there, and thus what kind of metrics we will try to affect with this new economy. So then we can also validate its results. And this might be done like in some, quarter fashion or yearly fashion. But this is my initial ideas about how go with it.
Great. So what's the role of modeling? I know that the token engineering commons and, block science and other folks place a strong emphasis on having a working model so that people can see, a simulation of the economy and then make decisions. Is one of our first steps to create like a CAD model, or just what are your thoughts on the role of modeling in this kind of rhythm of assessment, reassessment, upgrading, and decision making?
Mm-hmm. Well, in general, this is the good exercise for all the experts in the community trying to make sense out of the system. To use something like a Monte Carlo model to see what are the potential outcomes and what is their probability. So we also like to think that the market is rational, but there's so many factors, and we should be really seeing what happens in case of few black swans occurring, or what would be the most ideal situation, and finding some scenarios, probably answer scenarios for different groups of situations.
Cool. And so, given that, do you think that the creation of a CAD model is one of the first steps that you and the token economics working group will be approaching, or do you feel like that's something that can kind of come later?
Yeah, as much as I'm inspired about this novel tools, I'm currently I'm have some time in the space, but learning and understanding the network as is takes some time. While I'm doing that, it's still a long way to go, and also some basic assumptions about it should be tested, and many stakeholders should be consulted. So this kind of cool techie work would probably come closer towards the end, when we will have a established model, and then we can play with it and show the results, but probably not the first step.
Cool. And you're sort of describing an arc and a process of learning, both your own learning, but also it sounds like the community and different stakeholders learning and growing their own capability to understand the system, the levers, checks, balances, opportunities, weaknesses, and sort of it's both, from what you're describing, the process is both to achieve an end outcome, which is a better token economics, but also to achieve a higher degree of understanding amongst the stakeholders. Is that kind of true to how you're envisioning the process?
Yeah, of course. And even what does it mean, the better tokenomics? Because we could say that many investors desire higher token price, but one of the main features of our economy, as described in the white paper, is that we should reward the ecological outcomes. So them finding the right balance, of the token. Changes and basically the outcomes in the ecology, linking that into model that would make sense to major players in this, would create this vision of what is the right model. It's not just maximizing the price of the token. It's rather about relations with the wider economic system, with the whole general ecological assets market. So this desired position and the dialogue about it might be even more important than only the mechanism.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I mean, sort of shifting to my content hat or sharing an opinion, my opinion or desire has always been, if Regen as this governance utility token, a symbol of can evolve itself to be a symbol for regenerative outcomes. And there's and I don't think it's easy to make a direct causal relationship between regen and say carbon sequestration, but I think we can create a more nuanced and complex relationship where Regen has a value relationship with the work that we do as a network, as a community, coordinating amongst multiple stakeholders, amongst indigenous people and other land stewards, farmers, scientists, people running validators, computer scientists, developers. Sort of the theory is that we need this complex coordination of a community. And in order to do that, we need sort of this symbolic unit to coordinate each other. And our success is really our ability as a community to achieve those ecological outcomes that are outlined, the vision that's outlined in the white paper. And I think what gets most of us up out of bed in the morning to be working on all of this. So it very much is, I'm very excited about the sort of a non-linear complex approach where we are aiming to experiment and iterate towards that linkage evolving, but we're not assuming that we get this like direct causal binary thing. I'm very wary of those sorts of token economic systems where it's like super linear. Anyway, content hat off. I'm curious what you think about that. I'm sort of sharing a set of opinions that I have that maybe other people have as well, but maybe not. I mean, that's maybe an interesting place for debate, is like, how directly do we make that linkage? And what is the consequence of a linkage like that in how the network functions?
I would also maybe use this opportunity to hear out if anybody has some opinion about it or like the needs in this tokenomics.
Yeah, I would love to have anybody hop up here. So it's not just the usual suspects talking. I think there's going to be a great process that we evolve over time. So this isn't the last time, nor is it really the first to get your opinion in. But please, if folks have ideas that they'd like to share, either on the process or on the sort of like content, like what should be our goal, or are there some specific mechanisms you've already been thinking? I know that at the R&D Regen Network Development Public Benefit Corp, like inside of our context, where we're really focused on supporting people to use Regen Ledger to generate eco credits, there's kind of a short list of upgrades that we're excited to kind of like throw into the mix. Things like linking, like I'm personally excited to be exploring the potential of putting bonds up for credit class creation as a sort of quality assurance mechanism, where you can sort of stake a credit class, as it were. In order to achieve that, of course, you need to have clear parameters and kind of in quotes, social slashing mechanism where, that bond gets slashed under certain super specific conditions, and the people who review that are neutral. Anyway, there's a bunch of conditions that requires. But that kind of idea, the idea of burning Regen when eco credits are minting to create a little bit of a relationship there, and a set of fee splits to make it efficient, and sort of like build the community pool in variety of things. So those are things that, just sort of narrating, that R&D has been thinking about and has some information about what we're seeing and how things are using to push into the process that Max is leading. I'd be curious if other people have specific ideas that they've been thinking about. And I see a few folks who I know do sort of have thoughts. I don't know, who's on phones versus who's on computers and just listening in, and how passive folks want to be. But I would certainly welcome, Will, who's in the audience, if you want to, Will Gardner, if you want to hop up and share any thoughts that you've had. I know you and Paul from Cambium Validator have been thinking about network upgrades, and we've had some conversations about this. Justin, if you're interested in chatting, I know there's also kind of this creative ferment that we've had related to kind of the broader EcoCoin idea, or sort of like how do we generate these bigger mechanisms? So if there's ideas, this is a fun time to be thinking about how they evolve. Ideas evolve in practice in a very, very concrete way. I'm going to just pause for a moment. Max, feel free to chime in, and Sarah, Will, David, if you guys have any comments, please chime in.
Yeah, I mean, maybe while folks volunteer, if they want to come up and speak, I can speak about what I'm personally really excited about. And I'm a longstanding independent network member as a human. I'm really excited to reflect the economy of marketplace transactions, having fees on buyer-seller side, really showcasing the true economy of that particular product. And I'm also really excited to start telling this narrative between the financial value of the hectares of land regenerated. Because when you start to have a conversation about, there's 15 million hectares of land as projects using the tools of the network, they're issuing carbon and biodiversity assets. Those are real world commodities. They have real world values associated with them on a per credit basis. If you multiply the math up, I mean, you're talking by the end of this year of having $25 or $30 million worth of financial commodities utilizing the tools of Regen Network. It's actually really a significant scale of use of the tools and scale of the community impact on the land being 15 million plus hectares. And so part of my brain being finance background goes to the economy and the communication of the economy. And then part of my brain goes over to thinking about things like, how do we distribute the value of the network across a decentralized group of players? How do we form on a protocol level different DAOs for different functions, for marketing and token economics and marketplace maintenance and all of the pieces of the network that need to have value flowed to them in order for them to be effectively financially supported enough that we can keep things maintained, we can upgrade things, we can create space for all the community members to lean into the specific topics that they feel inspired by. So I get excited about how can we create an economy of DAOification and distributed participation that really broadens the distributed experience of the entire network, really allowing people to have unique places where they can come in and, just join a marketing DAO or just be an economist that joins a tokenomics DAO and be able to have incentives for people to come and create in all these little ways without having to take on thinking about the entire puzzle all at once. Because we're all really a pile of specialists with completely different skill sets that are kind of banding together and trying to find the flow of tools and systems and processes that will ultimately lead to ecological regeneration. So I get excited for the point when there's a lot more incentivization to inspire a lot more participation, because that's really what's going to catalyze action on a lot of different levels that ultimately you need a whole community of people with different skill sets and ideas and perspectives to be incentivized to lean in a really distributed way to succeed over time and for network-wide resilience. So my brain hops around with these topics and gets really excited about tooling and DAOification and participatory governance models and distributed systems of decision-making and design. So I'm just really excited to see where we all collectively design in this space together and, where that can take us, because I think it will be really empowering to create more spaces of connection and participation in the system at large.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Will, welcome up. How are you doing this morning?
Thanks. Doing well. Yeah, good to be on with you all. Yeah, it's an interesting discussion, and along with the permissionless upgrade or the path to permissionless tokens, I think it kind of goes along. I'm curious to see how we can structure the tokenomics, kind of going along with what Sarah was just talking about. We have this complex ecosystem of participants, and how do we incentivize participation for all these different players and specifically land stewards? but making the technology accessible and bringing them in. And I think there's a massive opportunity with the tokenomics upgrade to do this. And yeah, again, like Sarah was saying, like, okay, who are the different players, and even getting into like user journeys, like from the land steward to someone who's kind of validating what's going on there, and just all the different functions in the network. So I think, yeah, I'm curious to see where things are going to go and how we can continue to evolve with Regen Network.
Maybe one quick thing I would like to get your opinion on or explore while we're here on the call is that if we imagine like Regen like ecosystem and network as like a sub section of a bigger economy, and like one idea brought to me by by a VC who's supporting Regen is like the importance of the institutional funding. So we spoke sometime about the different banks, corporate funds from like Meta, like Google, and so on, and different other corpus. So it feels like inflow of funds from those entities might benefit the whole dynamics, liquidity, maybe stability of the space. But sometimes it also goes a bit against the ethos of commons and things like that. So I wanted to check with you, like, do on the IT such a conflict? Would it be welcome to work with such entities?
Yeah, I mean, I think that different people may have different answers. Just adding you, Howard. Yeah, so I mean, so generally speaking, I think zooming out, Regen Network, if you think about sort of the macroeconomics of things, Regen Network is a network that is dedicated to providing ecological regeneration services that can be purchased via eco credits. So our community export is our eco credits, right? Now the bulk of the market for those exports is corporate social and environmental responsibility programs. There are also market segments in the Web3 space, which we see, and there are blockchains using eco credits to, offset and other functions. But the bulk of the current market segment for our network's export, eco credits, is certainly tied up with ideas of, I guess, balancing negative impact with positive impact and balancing carbon liabilities or achieving, corporate social responsibility goals or ESG goals. So, I mean, I think we have to be engaging with those market segments and are. However, we have this strong belief, I think this is part of the theory of change, that to legitimately generate those units of ecological regeneration or health outcomes, you need to be managing that public goods process, because we're doing something very innovative in creating units that represent public goods that aren't excludable, like a positive ecological outcome. So therefore, multiple stakeholders are involved in producing those public goods. So there's a very different, the units that we export, I guess if you're thinking of it in sort of like traditional business terms, that we manufacture together as a network, we're manufacturing these eco credits. The process of manufacturing requires, this is the theory, a commons. And it requires local stakeholder participation in monitoring, in reporting, in setting standards, and in generating the units. So the economic theory behind Regen Network is that we can actually outcompete a completely privatized version of what we're doing by creating a commons around the production of ecological benefits, the monitoring of those benefits, and the creation of these eco credits. So just to kind of distill that thought. Like, I think, yes, we have to be able to engage with those corporates, but in order to produce what they need, we have to be sort of upholding this institution type and this kind of the manufacturing process of ecological outcomes and unitizing those outcomes needs to be sourced from a deep understanding and embodiment of the commons. Max, I'm curious how that, any reflections or responses to that, and then I want to invite Howard up to speak.
No, I just generated lots of continuous thought and in general about the theory of change we're trying to build. So I just hope to continue this conversation after it sits a bit in my head. Thank you for sharing your opinion.
Hey, Howard.
Good day, Gregory, and everybody else. You actually spoke to what I was going to raise as a question, and in respect to recognizing that corporate social responsibility is, for our vision, a huge market for the credits that we're looking to co-create. And I had wanted to make two comments. One being how important see it being to really distinguish the commodity carbon credits that have taken some serious reputational hits in a number of quarters, to make sure that our eco credits are distinguished. And I see that in two ways. One is to emphasize perhaps biodiversity as a proxy for all of the co-benefits, all of the regenerative qualities of our respective work. And secondly, to have standards, and standards that are easy to understand and can be translated from kind of the blockchain parlance that's shared on these calls, to folks who are not insiders in this world, and to find a way to make comprehensible what security blockchain gives the buyer of these credits as to additionality and authenticity and the other values that are going to be important, so that we don't get mixed up with the junk that's out there. And I say that as a lead into the question I wanted to ask. I know these discussions are going on in a lot of other spaces and in depth on Commonwealth, but I'm very concerned that permissionless is going to be misinterpreted as standardless, or as a way of reducing the quality that I think is an essential part of the Regen brand, if we want that to drive value in the kind of markets, the ESG markets you had referenced. So that was really what I had wanted to get out on the table and the airwaves here, to voice a concern that permissionless I don't think is a very positive term, and I think it could lead to confusion about a lack of standards.
Yeah, so this is an interesting point you're raising, Howard. I think permissionless is a technical term, and I think we need to, maybe we try to think about a rebranding of it internally and externally, but it's a technical upgrade in which people don't need permission to use key network functionality, right? I don't personally think it has any real impact on I don't think that it needs to have any real impact on the perception, corporate perception of quality. And let me explain why. Howard, do you mind muting while you're, thank you. Just a fair amount of background mic noise there. So, at least in my conception of things, the quality is the match between the evidence, the monitoring and reporting, and the claim that's being made, and the match between the claim about the outcome, carbon or biodiversity, and the importance of that outcome for a stakeholder, right? And so does the carbon in question make a meaningful, number one, if we're talking about a carbon credit, is like, to what degree of certainty can we prove that there's carbon somewhere? And then to what degree of certainty can we link the carbon in the state that it's in to meaningful climate impact? That's what most people are interested in. And that's like I think a distillation, the most common kind of like definition of quality, or what should be the common definition of quality. Of course, there's debates happening about at each of those levels, because each one of those is an exercise in science, and so there's disagreements and other things. I think as a network, up until now, we've tried to say what we're doing is building a platform that enables an open, dynamic approach to people programming in and defining quality, right? And that includes buyers. So a buyer, in the way we've been trying to structure things, can very easily say, here's our definition of quality, and these are the standards that meet it, and sort and only see the things that meet those standards. But we also can understand that centralization of standards setting, sort of like this myopic, sort of like this is the unit and all other units are bad, squashes innovation, it sort of flattens things, and oftentimes it's wrong. And there's weird politics around science and academics. So if we're going to sort of like gear up and go to battle and say, we're only allowing these standards into the system, I think the fear has been that we actually end up just recreating the legacy system, which is broken. And I would argue that the reason that it's broken is because it doesn't have an openness and an honesty to allow ratings, sort of like independent ratings, and like the real process of consensus to emerge as independent as possible from the politics of, the politics that kind of pollute the current carbon market standard setting, which is sort of a retrenchment and defense approach instead of a matching of claims to science approach, I would argue, is part of what's undermined. I think the more that we retrench and we sort of like adopt we have to only have these types of credits in the system, the more we do that, the more danger we put ourselves into creating a system that collapses under its own weight and ends up producing things that are of low quality, because there's perverse incentives involved, because people don't do real science. They just battle to defend their definition of quality, if that makes sense. So, I think what we need to pay attention to is the programming of and the ease of the user experience in a buyer being able to sort for the type of credits that match their buying criteria, right? And we need to invest our energy as a community, as you said, exactly as you said, Howard, in educating why they should have certain preferences, right? And providing information in a transparent way that allows them to evolve their preferences and evolve the definition of quality that matches real outcomes. Now, the bigger question, like linking this back in brief to the token economics discussion, a big question to keep in mind is, how do we incentivize, like what are the key behaviors in what I just talked about, sort of in defining quality, in enforcing quality, at different levels, curating and allowing access to that, in innovating and being dynamic and transparent so that science is getting better and not just there's just a battle. What are the key things we need to incentivize? And can we leverage the blockchain to incentivize those things so that we're actually generating kind of innovation as a commons? That's a really exciting edge. It's quite complex, but it's, I think, core to the heart of the bigger conversation we're having on this call around the token economics. How do we incentivize an open and dynamic approach that ends up innovating more quality and a higher degree of rigor and precision in a deeper relationship between the outcome that's being represented by the credit and the outcome that society needs, right? How do we evolve that rapidly? Because we have to evolve it rapidly, I think. Otherwise, we're sort of sunk. But both as a network, of course, because that's our sort of economic bread and butter, is exporting those ecological units, the eco credit, but also as a species. We need to solve this feedback loop where we can achieve ecological resilience and regeneration and reflect the value of that achievement back into society. Howard, how does my response land for you? Because I know there's like an existential thing you're chewing on, which is this, like, how do we define ourselves and defend ourselves against attacks? And I'm kind of backing up and approaching it from a more abstract layer, I realize. So how's that landing for you?
Well, I appreciate the articulation, and I'm somewhat reassured. I think the idea of ratings and a way to make visible the quality in an easy and a consistent way can deal with the permissionless. I would encourage you to consider rebranding, at least for external purposes, how these decentralized and more democratic credit issuances are going to be undertaken. But with the further explanation and that caveat, I think permissionless would be misunderstood as unauditable.
Yeah, I think we're just placing the gating in a different place, I think. So I think in an open system, people can define their own gating mechanisms instead of having them predefined. So anyway, I appreciate that. And I think there is a really interesting sort of branding opportunity for sort of that centers around openness, innovation, searchability, curation, certification processes, instead of sort of the centralized definition of quality. We push in innovation and evolution of what quality is. So I think there's a real, that's a good provocation, and we should do a little exercise on that. Will, what's on your mind?
Well, as you were speaking about it, I was just trying to think of like parallels, and it made me think of like the GitHubs of the world that have, allowed, fostered collaboration. And it made me think about in the AI space, like Kaggle or Hugging Face, right? And what we've seen in these is the ability to define metrics against which you can compare different models. And they've become, hotbeds of innovation. So I'm imagining just like one vision of how can tokenomics support methodology development, for example. And let's say I am interested in evaluating biodiversity or carbon, or I have my different values. How can I compare different methodologies or different credits? And how can I incentivize cooperation and competition around creating the highest quality credits and the highest quality methodologies?
Yeah, exactly. I love it. And, so how do we incentivize that innovation? How do we incentivize the creation of ratings? I've just been, maybe I'll share this back into the Commonwealth discussion, Howard, but I took a crack at, and there's been other attempts at this in the past, but I took a crack at just defining what I think is sort of a simple tiered system. I think we need to innovate more complex systems and invite engagement with external ratings agencies. But I also think we can create sort of a simple tiered system, which is sort of saying, look, this methodology went through the following process, and that, you know, is rigorous and hard to achieve, and these ones didn't, and make it just very simple to filter. And, you know, again, just speaking to you, Howard, and to everybody else, back on this idea of like opening up the system for innovative crediting that isn't necessarily going through a rigorous registration process. The idea here is that we're still going to be emphasizing, from a marketplace perspective, the credits that go through the rigorous process, right? And maybe, as Will is saying, maybe we can place incentives on that in a particular way, but we also want to open up this amazing functionality for people to start innovating sooner, because the cost right now to go through such a rigorous process to get a credit into the market is really quite high. And I think, you know, what happens when, you know, high schoolers want to creatively engage with local climate action and innovate a new idea, you know, where do they go to do that? Where do we go to coordinate and collaborate without permission? But when people know that they need to? I think part of, you know, if like you listen to Greta, she's basically upset at, you know, the in quotes adults not taking action. I guess my question is, how do we build a system that allows people at the grassroots to innovate and take action now without waiting for someone else to give them permission, while also, as Will just said, making a system that allows us to have common metrics to judge how successful that was. And I think if we nail this, we'll have a much more intelligent, much more impactful, much more dynamic system than choosing to just sort of like restrict into, you can only do this if you've met our criteria, right? Instead, saying, hey, let's innovate common criteria to measure each other by, and even innovate those, you know. So I think it's just, at least for me, it's much more enlivening. And I, you know, my sense is that's maybe a shared cultural opinion. I'm sorry, we looks like we lost Howard. So we just edged up past the hour, and I want to respect people's time. I'm sure you're working on wrapping us up, David.
I was about to, but a very solid conversation, and I think one of many we're going to be having here. Really nice to have all of you join us today. We'll be join us next week for the community call, and then obviously the week after that will be our Regenerati News Hour Revisited. And join us, in Commonwealth if you want to pick up the conversation, or our Discord. So thanks everybody for being here today. Thank you, Bax, for your recounting of the tales of Regen Europe. And Gregory, as always, for guiding our conversation. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.